Hey everyone, I'm Jared Parks. I'm a course developer at Udacity and on the iOS Nano degree, and we're here at AltConf 2016 this week to talk with some of the speakers, get to know a little bit about them, their interest, talk about maybe some WWDC stuff, and just different things. And I'm here with Mike Lee. Thanks so much for chatting with us today. Really appreciate it. So we've gotten a chance to get to know each other a little bit, but for everyone out there that doesn't know Mike Lee, could you give them a little bit of an introduction?
Sure. I'm an American engineer who lives in the Netherlands. I used to work for Apple. I had some Silicon Valley startups. I've done a lot of different things. These days I'm focusing on meta engineering.
So what is meta engineering? That sounds like a really cool topic.
So meta engineering is basically engineering engineers, right? You know, I started life as a pretty classical technologist. You know, I was really into computers and robots and space and science and all that kind of stuff. But I quickly came to realize that the biggest problem that we have is not the technical aspects of it. The biggest problem that we have are more structural. So, for example, if you have two parts of a system, say two features of an application, that don't seem to communicate well with each other, it's probably because it was two different teams that didn't communicate well with each other, right? So I'm mostly concerned, like, I don't really need to teach you to be a better programmer, I need to teach you to be an ethical programmer, right? I need to teach you how to think about privacy in a real way. My background is not in engineering, my background is actually in journalism and medicine. And by background I mean my schooling, right? And so when I was in college, I didn't take a single programming class, but I did take ethics classes, right? I had to study privacy. And so these are things that we're not typically taught in technology because they're humanities. But without understanding ethics, without understanding how people are meant to interact with each other, I mean, the way I feel about it is this. If you want to be evil, go be evil. But most of us think that we're doing good, and then all this evil happens by accident, and we don't know why. And a system has been developed over millennia for avoiding doing evil by accident, and that is the system of ethics. And so it is much better for the future of the stability of the system to teach engineers about ethics than it is to make engineers better at programming.
There's all kinds of great stuff wrapped up in that, and one of them that stands out to me is kind of the soft skills.
Yeah.
And that's something that we're working to teach engineers. What's something, maybe like one piece of advice you would give to a budding engineer about like a soft skill that they could focus on to work better with other engineers to create greater products?
From a technical standpoint, I tend to have my entire workflow be automated. And the automation uses the accessibility system. So it kind of like automatically, it gives you a view of the system. Like if you can use a computer, that's one thing. If the computer can use a computer, then it really is accessible. But it's more than that, right? For example, how many of us have actually closed our eyes and used the phone with voiceover on?
Oh wow, yeah, I never even thought of doing that.
You gotta, right? How can you have that experience otherwise, you know? We tend to think of accessibility as like, look, I'm not blind. I'm a little hard of hearing, but I'm certainly not deaf. I have both of my hands now, right? But what happens if I break an arm? You know, what happens if I'm in the dark, right? What happens if it's noisy where I am, so I can't hear, right? Like we all need accessibility sometimes, and God forbid, what happens if something happens to me in the future, right? So like most of the work that I do on accessibility is because it's kind of selfish. It's kind of for myself, right? Because I want to make sure that I can still use this machine in all the ways that the machine can be used for me.
Yeah, and you definitely, you can have blind spots if you're not, I mean, I guess sometimes we forget we're designing these apps or software for users. Who is that end user? So now that you're kind of meta engineering, you know, you're looking at engineers and trying to figure out the best ways to make them work, is there an exercise that you make them go through, or like what does your management look like of other engineers? Are you working one-on-one and doing your own mentorship?
It's a lot of listening, to be honest. It's just a lot of listening because you can give someone information, but they have to be able to sort of digest it. And if you just sort of present people with things, it's very hard for them to learn that stuff necessarily. Really, people need to get there on their own, but they need to be led. And so what needs to happen is as their brains raise objections, you need to be able to understand those objections so that you can, sort of answer them and put them in the right direction. So it really is, it's kind of a case-by-case thing. And a lot of times, I mean, I've been part of this for a long time, and there are more people who have sat down and had a conversation with me about what's going on with themselves than I could ever even attempt to remember. And a lot of those conversations, like, I don't even remember the conversations, because it's not like I sat down with a thing that I wanted to tell them. It's that I sat down, I listened to what they had to say. It went through the neurons that make me me, and that is the collection of all of the stuff that I've learned. And then I sort of return that information to them in that processing, and work with them to help them understand, and often to gain a better understanding myself.
It's powerful stuff, man. It's great that you're talking about this. How did you move, I guess, how has your developer journey kind of led you to where you are now? It sounds like you just have such a great world perspective on different things from being a lot of different places.
So I am a person who has never belonged anywhere, right? I'm a person who has always been in between. I'm a mixed race person. I know that because I've been living in Northern Europe for 5 years, I look pretty white, but like it's really weird for me to pass as white because that's very recent, right? So my father was from Japan. White as a race is a very racist race, right? Because white is a one drop race, right? One drop away from white and you're no longer white. Japanese as a race, a culture, whatever you want to call it, is equally xenophobic, right? And so I am the combination of two ethnic groups that will not accept me as their own, right? Like I grew up in Hawaii, which is full of Asians, and so I was very kind of like nationalistically Japanese, which is a stupid thing because it's not like Japanese people will accept me either, right? And so I'm just sort of like stuck between the two. But it's not just that, it's like, I grew up in Hawaii, which is both the United States and also nothing like the United States, right? I grew up speaking Pidgin English, which is not exactly English and not exactly a foreign language, right? I'm an engineer, but I didn't go to school for engineering. There is no place, there is no people, right? Where I can be there and I can be like, this is my place and these are my people. The only place where I can be that's like that is a place where everyone is welcome.
How do we get there? What's your...
It's really funny because I grew up very just naive, right? Just like a kid is, right? And then I've sort of like had these things, taught to me, right? Like one day I'm told, oh yeah, by the way, there's a thing called white and you're not it. And then as I got older, I started to get really interested in these things. I started to really sort of notice these things, and I started to try to talk about them, but they made people extremely uncomfortable, right? And my friends were always arguing with me and telling me to shut up. And so as I traveled around the world and looked for a place to be, I found Amsterdam, which is a very incredibly diverse place. Much like Hawaii where I grew up, it's a very incredibly diverse place. And that was how, in a very literal sense, I found that place where I can be. But that place is not necessarily a physical place. That place is really it's like a state of being for us, right? And so it really comes down to doing the hard mental exercise of thinking about these things, of trying to understand people, of trying to understand concepts that are scary or offensive, and then trying to share that information. I mean, one of the reasons why I talk about this stuff is because it helps me to understand this stuff better. And so I guess the short answer to the unnecessarily long rant that I just went on is just like this, right? By talking to other people, right? By going places, by meeting people, by doing things, by having experiences, by being open-minded. That's how we get there.
Wow, so you've been at this for, how long have you been coding?
I mean, I got my first computer when I was a senior in high school, so that would have been right at the dawn of 1994. But we didn't have the internet yet, not in Hawaii. And so, there was one person who had a computer that had 5 modems, and he paid money for 5 phone lines. And you could pay like $5 a month in order to have an account on this thing, so you could call and chat. And it was real time. You hit a T on your keyboard, and it was like T. Like there was no anything because it was so slow. And we had a massive bot war. And it's people are like, ooh, bots. And it's like, yeah, man, we're having bot wars 20 years ago. Was that programming? I mean, I guess. It was just kind of like a fun hobby. And it really wasn't until into the 2000s when I actually started doing it professionally.
What was the first app that you built?
So, I used to work for this airline. We built a simple online training system, and the airline ran basically a test. We'll pick the smallest group in the airline, and we'll try using this online training system instead of our current system. And that test saved them $800,000, and it was an annual recurrent training. And so that was the thing that got me that job.
Start of the career. So was it both a web app and like also a mobile experience, or was this kind of web leading you into?
So back then, mobile experience meant like you could pick up your computer and carry it over here and plug it in. So that wasn't really a concern. No, it was a standards compliant XHTML 1.0 site using JavaScript hosted on ASP. But what was really funny is that so we were not employed by the airline for the purpose of writing code, because there's a department for that. But that department was not very good at their jobs, or not very eager to do the work that was being asked of them. They're an IT department. They're not really in the job of making apps anyway, right? So they weren't really into it. But at the same time, they really didn't want anybody else to be into it either, because it's their territory. And so they put all of these bizarre restrictions on us. And so I ended up having to do a lot of really strange things. Normally, if you have a database of information, you store that in a database. But we were not allowed to use a database for whatever reason. And so I ended up writing a database management system using the XML spreadsheet transformation language, or XSLT. So basically, every time you would change something in the database, you would transform the existing database into the next state, which I think is probably the most ludicrous piece of software I've ever heard of to this very day. But it did the job.
So Mike, for everyone that's watching that may want to be getting into development, into either iOS development or any kind of development, what's your tip? What's your kind of guiding light, your advice you would give to them?
I think that a lot of us tend to be loners. I'm very introverted myself. I think a lot of us are. We like computers because they're simple, but it's a real risk to kind of lock yourself in a room and try to do it on your own. I think that if I look at my own career, I kind of went from starting out to really becoming good at what I was doing to really getting to the point where I am now. And the difference has always been expanding the number of people that I know. You know, at first I'm trying to do it on my own, and I only get so far. And then I start working with a mentor, and that really accelerated me. But the best piece of advice I ever got was, there's a great community full of people out there. You need to go and start meeting people in the community. And the more people I've met, the more I've learned, and the better person, but also the better engineer I've become.
Is there anything on the horizon, stuff that's been discussed, rumors around WWDC, things that you're excited about, that you're ready to see or hoping to see?
You know, I've started referring to Apple as the least evil of giant evil tech corporations. And that really, I think, continues to be true. And we see that with, I think, a lot of the privacy implications of the stuff that Apple talked about, for example. It seems like every other large tech company is, like, privacy to them is a thing that they need to overcome in order for their business model to work. And Apple seems to be the only technology company that continues to not see their users as the product itself. Apple seems to be the only large company that remains focused on actually providing the best experience for their users. And the best experience for the user is always going to be an experience that respects their privacy and has their informed consent.
Yeah, they definitely take how do we empower and make the lives of our customers better? That's something that they talk about a lot.
We really have to balance this stuff, you know, and it's increasingly dangerous. I think especially with the Snowden revelations, it really, our worst fears were kind of realized, which is that a lot of the technology that we thought was really cool, every tool is also a weapon. Like, it's great that we have little cameras. It's great that we have awesome microphones. It's great that we have GPS trackers, but it also means that now there's cameras and microphones and GPS trackers anywhere, right? Like, I understand that people are really excited about being able to talk to their computer, but as we do that, we're also teaching computers how to understand humans. We really need to be more focused on teaching humans to understand computers and not the other way around. But the fact is, most of the world's technology is driven from the United States, and most of the United States innovation is driven by, one way or the other, military funding, and that seems to be largely interested in tools of surveillance and control. So we need to really be careful in how we think of these things and where we decide to bring areas of innovation.
So from somebody that has this global perspective, I mean, we have a lot of students all around the world that aren't around Silicon Valley, even though that seems to be a birthplace of a lot of ideas. How do you, or what's the advice you give to them about, you know, either whether it's finding jobs or whether it's just like being informed about it or making an impact about it?
I think that one of the most important things that people need to understand is that you shouldn't fetishize Silicon Valley too much. People seem to think that it's a magical place where everything happens and it's the only magical place where everything happens, but the reality is that's not true. there are great technical communities all over the world, and even if there aren't great technical communities, you can build a great technical community. When I first arrived in Amsterdam as a city, it was fantastic, but as a technical community, it wasn't really, there wasn't really one. There were a lot of technologists there, but everyone seemed to complain about the same thing, which is that it seems like I'm the only person here doing technology. There's not really a community. And so, we actually started the organization to bring those people together and to build that community. And now we see Amsterdam really having a technology output profile that's just growing. I mean, they're calling it the third golden age. So everybody anywhere in the world looking at Silicon Valley and thinking, one day I'll get there and then this thing will really take off. Nah, the thing that's preventing you from getting this thing done tomorrow is you, right? Anywhere in the world, anywhere you are, you can be doing the stuff that you're trying to do. You don't need the Valley to make innovation, and in fact, it's better for the world if innovation is made all over the world and not in just one place.
Very cool. So whether it's Nerderlands, whether it's AltConf, just these types of community events, why should a new student or somebody that's new to mobile development, why should they go to these?
You meet people who know things you don't know, who experience things the way you don't experience them. Honestly, everything I've gotten, all the power behind me has been the people that I've met, the people I've worked with. You find people who know the things that you want to know. You find people who work at the companies that you want to work with. You find kind of everything you need, honestly. I mean, I think that community is the most powerful tool that humans have ever developed, and I think that as developers, community is also our most powerful tool.
So, just wrapping up here, what if you could condense it to one sentence of all the things we've talked about, the things you're speaking about this week, what is the one piece of advice that for somebody entering into this field that you would give them?
If you think that you don't have the power to change the things that are making the world terrible in your eyes, then you're wrong.
You have the power.
You have the power.
Thanks so much, Mike. It's been a pleasure talking with you. We really appreciate taking the time.
Cheers.